Hello, my dear students. Welcome back to the 8th standard English class. In this class, we will continue the first chapter from your English textbook, The Best Christmas Present in the World. In the previous class, we came to know some of the incidents and events took place in Jim Macpherson's letter, which was read by the author of this lesson. Continuing further today, we will read the remaining parts of the story. I folded the letter again and slipped it carefully back into its envelope. I kept awake all night. By morning, I knew what I had to do. I drew into Bridport, just a few miles away. I asked a boy walking his dog where Copper Beaches was. House number 12 turned out to be nothing but a burnt out shell, the roof gaping and the window boarded up. The author, after reading the letter, he slipped it carefully back into its envelope. He did not wanted the owner of the letter to know that someone has read the letter. So carefully he kept the letter back into its envelope. At that night, the author could not sleep after reading that letter, and he was very sure that he wanted to go to give the letter to whom it belongs. And so in the morning, he knew what he had to do, and he immediately went to the Bridport. Bridport, as we know, it was the place where Connie lived. It was few miles away from where Arthur was. And reaching there in the morning, Arthur asked address to a boy who was taking his dog for a walk. But when the author reached there, the house number 12, which is the house of the Connie, was nothing but burnt out. Here the word burnt out means destroyed by fire. And the roof was gaping. Here the word gapping means it was completely open. Okay, the windows are boarded up. Here the word boarded up, that means covered with wooden boards. I knocked at the house next door and asked if anyone knew the whereabouts of a Mrs. Macpherson. Oh yes, said the old man in his slippers. He knew her well. A lovely old lady, he told me. A bit muddle-headed, but at her age she was entitled to be, wasn't she? 101 years old, she had been in the house when it caught fire. No one really knew how the fire had started, but it could well have been candles. She used candles rather than electricity because she always thought electricity was too expensive. So here the neighbor tells, of course he knew Mrs. Macpherson. She was a good lady but little muddle-headed. Here the word muddle-headed means confused. And he also says that it is just a common thing that the older people are getting muddle-headed or confused. And the neighbor also tells that Mrs. Macpherson was now 101 years old and she was in the house when it caught up the fire. No one knew how the fire took place, but everyone assumed that it was because of the candle which she lit up, and she used the candle because she thought electricity was too expensive. The fireman had got her out just in time. She was in a nursing home now, he told me. Burlington House, on the Dorchester Road, on the other side of town. So when the house was on fire, the fireman saved her. Now she was in a nursing home that is called Burlington House. And the neighbor gave him an address to that place. I found Burlington House nursing home easily enough. There were paper chains up in the hallway and lighted Christmas tree stood in the corner with a loop-sided angel on top. I said I was a friend come to visit Mrs. Macpherson to bring her a Christmas present. The author found Burlington House nursing home easily without any difficulty, and when he went inside, he see a lot of decoration and preparations were made there as it was a Christmas day. And Christmas tree was also decorated on the top of which an angel was kept. In entrance, the author told to the people at the nursing house that he was the friend of Mrs. Macpherson and came to visit her and also bought a present for her. I could see through into the dining room where everyone was wearing a paper hat and singing. The matron had a hat on too and seemed happy enough to see me. She even offered me a mince pie. She walked me along the corridor. So here, authors saw the dining area of a nursing home where people were wearing paper hats and singing and celebrating the Christmas. The matron. Here, the matron means the one who take care of the people in the nursing home, right? She was also wearing a paper hat. Now, when she heard someone came to visit Mrs. Macpherson, she was very happy to hear that. She offered a author mince pie. Mince pie means that's a sweet dish, okay? And then she took narrator along with her towards the corridor. Mrs. Macpherson is not in with the others, she told me. She is rather confused today, so we thought it is best if she had a good rest. She has no family, no one visits, so I am sure she will be only too pleased to see you. She took me into a conservatory with wicker chairs and potted plants all around and left me. The matron said Mrs. Macpherson was a little confused and was not feeling well, so she was taking rest. And Mrs. Macpherson has no family, no one came to visit, so she will be too pleased. Hear the word too pleased, that means very happy, happy to see the author. Then she took the author to conservatory. Here the conservatory is a little room where Mrs. Macpherson was kept. Now, there were wicker chairs. Here, wicker chair means handmade chairs or oven chairs. Okay, and also some of the potted plants were also surrounded by that room. The old lady was sitting in a wheelchair, her hands folded in her lap. She had silver white hair pinned into a wispy bun. The old lady here signifies Mrs. Macpherson. She was sitting in a wheelchair. Her hands were folded. That means she was keeping her hands on laps. She have silver white hair pinned into wispy bun. That means she has tied her hair in bun like you can see in this picture also. She was gazing out at the garden. Hello, I said. She turned and looked up at me vacantly. Happy Christmas, Connie, I went on. I found this. I think it's yours. As I was speaking, her eyes never left my face. So when Arthur reached near Mrs. Macpherson, she was already looking outside at the garden. Arthur went near and said, Hello? She turned and looked vacantly. Here the word vacantly means without understanding who was he. Okay. So Arthur then immediately greeted her Happy Christmas, and he addressed her as Connie instead of Mrs. Macpherson. This was the name that only Jim Macpherson used to take. The author then showed a little tin box which he found it from the desk, and he gave it to Mrs. Macpherson, saying that he thought it was hers. As the author saying this, Mrs. Macpherson kept on gazing in his face. I opened the tin box and gave it to her. That was the moment her eyes lit up with recognition and her face became suffused with a sudden glow of happiness. I explained about the desk, about how I had found it, but I don't think she was listening. Then here, the author opened the tin box and gave it to Mrs. Macpherson. That moment, her eyes were lit up. Here, the word lit up, that means to become bright with happiness or excitement. Because she recognizes the box and the letter which was in it. The author explained how he found it that letter in the desk, but she was not listening to anything. She was just lost in the tin box. For a while, she said nothing but stroked the letter tenderly with her fingertips. Stroked the letter tenderly, that means softly she was just rubbing the fingers over the letter that the narrator or the author has gave to her. Suddenly she reached out and took my hand. Her eyes were filled with tears. "You told me you would come home by Christmas, dearest," she said. "And here you are, the best Christmas present in the world. Come closer, Jim dear, sit down." Till the moment, Connie did not speak a word, but suddenly she held Arthur's hand. Connie's eyes were filled with tears that moment. She said, "You told me that you will come home by Christmas. Here you are, fulfilled your promise. Come close to me, sit beside me, Jim dear." Now here, why did Connie calling the author as Jim? It is because she thought the person standing in front of her was not the author, but she took him as to be Jim Macpherson. That is why she calling the author Jim dear. And she also said it was the best Christmas present ever. I sat down beside her. She kissed my cheek. "I read your letter so often, Jim. Every day I wanted to hear your voice in my head. It always made me feel you were with me. And now you are. Now you are back. You can read it to me yourself. Would you do that for me, Jim dear? I just want to hear your voice again. I would love that so much. And then perhaps we will have some tea. I would make you a nice Christmas cake, marzipan, all around. I know how much you love marzipan." So Connie kisses the author's cheek and tells him that she often read that letter. She also tells him she always wanted to hear that letter in his voice. She asked him, almost requested him, to read the letter for her in his own voice to her. And and also said that together they can have a tea and the cake, which is marzipan, which was Jim's favorite. Okay, my dear students, that is it for the story of the best Christmas present in the world. So I will stop the class here for today. I will see you all in the next class.